tonight. Thank you for taking time to join us. My name is Rachel Helbring. I'm with the Community Engagement at the State Museum. I am only here briefly for a moment before we let everybody else start talking to tell you if you have any tech issues, we are here to help you. There's a chat bar either down towards the right of your screen or right in the lower middle part. Just click on the little chat bubble if you have any issues. Just choose all panelists to direct your questions to. Myself and Joyska Nunez Medina are on here to help you if you have any issues getting on. We do ask that you make sure you're muted. That should also be in kind of the bottom middle of your screen. If for some reason it looks like your microphone going, please mute yourself just so it doesn't cause any interference. We are recording this and it will be on our YouTube page in the next few days. So if you really like it or if you want to share it with friends, please do. And we do have a second part. We're going to have another one of these conversations at the end of the month. So please check our events calendar to see what all we're doing this month. We're very excited. But I will stop and let Bridget take it over. She is our curator of social history and she is moderating this wonderful discussion. Thank you, Bridget.
Thank you so much for having me. Hello, everyone. I'm super excited to be here tonight. Thank you all for taking the time out of your day to attend our program tonight. And a definite big thank you to all of our panelists for taking some time out of their day to speak with us about something that we all feel is very important, the historic Black communities of Tennessee. So we're going to be focusing on a few interesting areas tonight. We're going to be focusing on Maury County. We're going to be focusing on historic Black Knoxville and my home sweet home. We're going to be focusing on Orange Mound, which is in Memphis, Tennessee. So just to kick us off, I'm going to give everybody a moment to just speak for 5 to 10 minutes about just the history of your community, what you know about it, and overall history. And first up on my screen is Miss Jeneisha. So we'll just go in that order.
Hello, everyone. Can everyone hear me, see me okay? Thumbs up. Great. My name is Jeneisha Harris. I am a student at Tennessee State University here in Nashville, Tennessee. I am an activist, an organizer, and what I like to call a self-proclaimed rebel. I am originally from Memphis, Tennessee, born and raised. I come from a very small but rich community called Orange Mound. It was founded in 1825 by someone named John George Dedrick. I grew up on a tiny little street called Marshall Neal Street, and the countering street across from me was actually Dedrick Street, which was named after the plantation owner. And so it got its name from Orange Mound because there were a lot of oranges planted in these trees. And so they came up with this clever idea to call it Orange Mound. The plantation owner died. His wife, obviously was in charge of all of his assets. And so she, his wife, sold the land to someone named Izzy Eugene. And so she specifically told him not to sell any acres of this land to Black people. But guess what? He did it anyway. So he split up 5,000 acres of land. He split it up. He sold it to African Americans in that small community for $100. And so these were very tiny, narrow houses. If you actually go back to Orange Mound, you can see that a lot of them, including my old childhood household that I grew up in, they're now called shotgun houses. And so that's just a little bit about the community of Orange Mound. A lot of people don't know that it was actually a plantation. I remember finding that out, just being in complete awe. Just because of the setup, you can tell that, it was once a plantation at some point. And so that's a little bit about Orange Mound. I'm so thankful to be here today. I'm thankful for Bridget for inviting me, the Tennessee State Museum, the entire staff. I'm really looking forward to hearing and learning from each of you, each of the panelists, and welcome.
Thank you so much, Jeneisha. Up next is Miss Joanne McClellan. She is going to be representing Maury County, Tennessee. So Miss Joanne, if you could tell us a little bit about the history of your area.
Well, for the purpose of this discussion, I'm going to talk about Colombia. There are several small communities in Maury County, but Colombia is the largest. It has the largest population. There are like 42,000 people in Colombia. The African American population of Colombia is about 18%. Columbia, Maury County was founded in 1807. Columbia was founded. It's your typical southern town. Currently, we have about people, African Americans, who are representing us on the city council and the county commissioners. We have a vice mayor who is also African American. We have had African Americans on the city council and also the county commissioners for consistently since integration in 1969. The current mayor is Bianca, and she's been on the city council for 22 years, and she's also the director of access and diversity at the community college. We do have a community college since, I think, 1965. So thank you for inviting me, and it should be interesting.
Thank you so much. And last but not least, we have Reverend Reneé Kesler representing Knoxville. So tell us a little bit about Black people in the community up there.
Thank you so much, Bridget. I'm so honored to be here and grateful to be on this panel. Jeneisha, was amazing hearing you talk. So I'm super proud of you. So thank you for representing very well. Love the rebel in you as well. And it was so nice to meet Miss McClellan. So I'm honored just to share space with all of you in this moment. Knoxville is unique, and it always has been. I always say, when you think about Middle Tennessee and West Tennessee, East Tennessee sort of has its own it had its own topography, which is also going to make it different in terms of enslavement populations and things like that. Knoxville is going to become a city in 1791. And in 1791, about 5% of the population that was here at that time will be enslaved people. It's a little over 3,000 people when the city begins and the first census is taken. So our history, Knoxville likes to always taunt that it doesn't have a race issue. It's always been that way, right? For many years, it always talks about, the city of the South, but this is the city to be in the South, because we don't have a race issue. The Black folks and the white folks get along really well. That's always been sort of the history of Knoxville in terms of what we wanted to believe it was. But the reality of it is, all throughout its history, Knoxville has had some challenging situations. So for example, when the rest of the world is having its issues, and I'll just go back to Emancipation Proclamation, the Civil War. So we know that we celebrate Juneteenth, right? And in Tennessee, for many of us, we're familiar with the 8th of August. So Juneteenth is going to be June 19, 1865. That then they're going to actually find out that they should have been emancipated 2.5 years before. So in the state of Tennessee, we commemorate the 8th of August, right? And we commemorate that because then military Governor Andrew Johnson, who will later become the president of the United States, will then emancipate his own enslaved people, many of which are his illegitimate children. They will migrate to Knoxville, Tennessee. That date was on August 8th, but it's significant in Knoxville history, not just across the state. So that's Greenville, Tennessee, and they'll migrate to Knoxville, and they're going to be buried in the Knoxville College Cemetery, which is our HBCU. And I know you don't know anything about that, Jeneisha, at TSU, but there used to be a very vibrant, historically Black college here called Knoxville College, which really graduated some of the best and brightest, I'm going to say, in the world, because they matriculated all over the world to do great and wonderful things. Suffice it to say that they're going to matriculate here. The thing that's interesting about the 8th of August, particularly in Knoxville, is so fast forward all the way down during legal segregation. We use that same date, August 8th, as the only date that Black people could go to Chilhowie Park. And you're smiling, Ms. McClellan, so you must have heard these stories before.
I know the story very well.
You know the story, so you got some roots down here in Knoxville. And so what's going to happen is Chilhowie Park is going to be a year-round fairground, right? So this is when you have your Ferris wheels and all this stuff, and it's year-round. They use the same date from 1863. All the way down to legal segregation in Knoxville to say August 8th is the only day that Black people can go to Chilhowie Park. Of course, it'll go eventually to 1 week, and then eventually it'll open up. So there are many Black people in Knoxville who are still living today. Remember going to Chilhowie Park on the 8th of August. that does a huge celebration on the 8th of August every year. We did it virtually, of course, this past year in 2020, and it will probably be virtual again this year, but we do large events about that because we talk about that racial structure in Knoxville all the way through, from 1863 all the way through. And I'll just pause for just a moment to mention even in between there. So Knoxville is going to have its first Black elected persons, males, to be in office in 1869. We'll have two, Isaac Gammon and James, in 1869. Now, it's going to be 100 years from 1869 before the first Black female will be elected to office. And that'll be in 1969, and that'll be Miss Sarah Moore Green, and there'll be a school named after her. In Knoxville, though, from 1908 to so we had this great era of just like the rest of the country, where you have a Reconstruction period going on. Things are going great. You got Black folks elected in office. All of a sudden, after 1912, from 1908 to 1912, Henry Morgan Green is going to be the last Black person elected to city council in Knoxville for almost 60 years. There won't be a single Black person in Knoxville in office in city council. It'll be nearly 5 decades in the county side. So that Jim Crow period was really hard in Knoxville. And then backing up to the race riots. So in history, if you look, the greatest race riots took place in the summer of 1919 all over the country. There were race riots everywhere, nothing new under the sun. It was a double pandemic, much like what's happening right now. We're in the middle of a racial pandemic and a health pandemic. Nothing new. 1918, 1919, you got the Spanish flu going on. At the same time, you have a race riot all over the country. And it's the worst race riot in our country's history because there are more Black people lynched in the summer of 1919 than in any period in history. It's so bad, it's called the Red Summer. Knoxville will become one of the Red Summer cities. We'll have our race riot in 1919. So when you talk about the city of Knoxville, from its very beginnings, there are so many major challenges in our history that we have had with regard to racial struggles and race relations, and they continue today. Of course, you'll move into your civil rights movement, and then you'll move into where we are today. So I'll stop there because you know I'm a preacher, so I can keep going, but I'll just leave it there and let you ask questions.
I love it. I just learned more about Knoxville in this 5-6 minutes than I think I ever knew myself. So thank you for giving us that information. And we're going to get a little bit deeper off into this history as we continue our conversation. So I'm going to begin with my very, very first question, because I just want to understand a little bit more about the environment. So when you think about the environment that your community sit in, can you describe that environment for me? And I know they're all going to be very different because the areas that we all come from kind of affects the culture of the people that live within the environment. So again, I see Jeneisha's here first on my screen. So Jeneisha, can you describe a little bit about the environment that is Orange Mound?
I would say the environment that I grew in was impoverished, but of tradition, abandoned, but accomplished. A lot of people watch the documentary that you can find on YouTube about Orange Mound, and they asked, is it a suburb now? Did they fix it up? And the answer is no. No gentrification. It's still such a historic place. And I believe that it's so historic. Many of the buildings, people just don't want to, tamper with history. We have so many historic churches that are nearby the place that I grew up in. And so I would say the environment is so full of love, so full of compassion. A lot of what we see on the news, and the media can be our biggest enemy. A lot of what we see on the news is false. They don't show the good side. They don't show the community barbecues or the community gardens or any of the community centers that we now have. But I would say that in my experience, the environment of Orange Mound is full of love.
And I definitely agree with that. I think that can be said for all of our communities, especially when it comes to being impoverished, but also being filled with love and compassion at the
Right.
same time. That there's a common misconception that just because you're poor, you don't have happiness, and happiness can exist within any realm. So thank you for that. Now, Miss Joanne, could you tell us a little bit about Colombia and the environment that has been produced in Colombia?
It's really sort of interesting. In Colombia, we have a lot of churches. The community sort of changed when you think of a traditional community, it changed when the schools were integrated, because typically the communities were surrounded or in the same location as the schools. But once there were no existing schools in the community, it sort of changed. So when I think of Colombia as a community, I think of all of Colombia, not just a specific area. There are a couple of specific areas in Colombia, College Hill, Macedonia, East Hill, where the schools were. But all of those people tend to accept or think of all of Colombia as the community, if you understand what I'm saying. We don't have, like what Jeneisha was saying, we don't have like little specific areas like that. But what draws people to the specific areas, we still do have churches there. We still have African American churches that are very, very active. We have several churches that are over 100 years old in Colombia, and they're still very active. And there are a lot of traditions within the church that draws people back home or from other communities into their community. So the fact that when the schools integrated, took the schools out of that particular off that street, it sort of changed the complexion of the community. And we don't have a lot of communities in Maury County or in Colombia, a lot of areas in Maury County that are completely 100% African American.
Okay. And I found that to be really interesting. I know we talked earlier, I told you that my fiance is from a very, very rural community in Arkansas. So he echoes a lot of what you're saying about it being very integrated in its own way because of how small it is essentially, and everybody just kind of knows everybody, and there's only one high school there as well. So he has this a similar sentiment there. So thank you for that information. And we're going to dig a little bit deeper into Colombia as we continue our conversation as well. Now, Reverend Kessler, could you give us a little bit about the environment in Knoxville? I am intrigued about all this information about Knoxville.
Well, I will echo the sentiments of both panelists and say that we have, a lot of that same structure, because a lot of the things that happen in the Black community are not unique to one or the other. It's part of our tradition and our culture. I will say that Knoxville is very segregated. We have East, North, West, and South, and you can just about say, this is this income white person in South Knoxville, this income white person in North Knoxville, this income white person in West Knoxville, and then East Knoxville is Black. And then it doesn't matter if you have Black people sprinkled in the upper end of town with money in West and North. It is very clear that East Knoxville, when you say East Knoxville, you are speaking the language of the Black community. And so a lot of times that then denotes some kind of a negative connotation. And I think, Jeneisha mentioned that. It's like it's not true, but you feel like when you hear that some negative came off of that. So in Knoxville, I'm a native Knoxvillian. I was born and raised here. So I have my own story. We'll talk about the greater story of Beck, the work that we do here and how we got created. And I'll talk to you a little bit about the space that you see behind me and the real community and how we got to where we are today. But let me just say that today, like as with the churches are very important. And so there are lots of churches in Knoxville. We kind of have one on every corner in East Knoxville. That's how it works. But it's okay because there are different denominations, there are different sizes, there are different, styles and traditions, but nevertheless, they are all connected. So Knoxville has a very connected faith community. And I think that it is, but again, it's very, particularly in the African American community, many of us are very segregated from the other communities. We are going through gentrification again. So unlike the community that she mentioned, our communities are going through gentrification. I'm going to talk about what it looked like before. I live in a house right now that I grew up in as well. And it's in the East Knoxville Park Ridge neighborhood. It's an old neighborhood that was predominantly Black when I grew up. We call it the hood today, and it's becoming gentrified. And so now that's where we are. And Knoxville is sort of struggling with its identity again. And people are wondering, is history repeating all over again? And we'll talk some more about that.
Thank you so much for that. I see church is something that's kind of echoed, and that is very true. Church is a big deal in the Black community. If you are tuning in and you did not know that, Black people love church. I myself, I'm from Memphis. I am a preacher's child. So I have had more church in my life than I can articulate right now in front of you guys. So yes, the church goes into our culture, it goes into our spirit, and it goes right into our next question. When you guys begin to think about the culture and the spirit of your communities, what is that rooted in? Can you describe a little bit of that? Jeneisha, again, you're up first.
There is literally a church on every corner in Orange Mound. Church is something that is super prevalent. Memphis was actually the headquarters for COGIC. If you don't know what that means, that's Church of God in Christ. I grew up COGIC myself. And so all the conventions were there in Memphis, Tennessee. It was a big deal. That's one of the traditions that we had in Memphis. And I always say that Memphis is, or Orange Mound specifically, excuse me, is rich in spirit, but poor in resources, poor in accessibility. And so I'll talk a little bit more later about some of the specific issues that we have concerning that. But spirit is something that is super prevalent in Orange Mound. Every Sunday, somebody's going to church. You see big hats, you see colorful suits. It's literally a tradition. It's something that we practice every single Sunday. Going to church, walking from church. I know my grandma used to tell me that they used to literally walk to church, come back home, eat Sunday dinner, and just have a good time. That's a part of not only Black culture, but what we experience in Orange Mound specifically.
And I wholeheartedly agree with you. Church is definitely a part of the spirit of all Black communities. It's part of our culture. It's not just something that you go do on Sunday. It's like a community. There's a reason when you go to church, you call people sister so-and-so and brother so-and-so. It's a family. And I resonate. I grew up Pentecostal, which is very similar to the COGIC faith. And I can completely understand how much you go to church. Lord have mercy, Jesus.
And if I can add, I'm sorry, let's think about it. Orange Mound was a literal plantation. I think people forget about that. It was a plantation. And if we know anything about slavery, if we study slavery, spirit was such a prevalent thing because the Bible, their religion, that was all that they had to hold on to a little piece of hope and glory. And so translating that from the 1800s to the 1900s up until now, we've passed that on multi-generationally, pass it on to our ancestors, to our children, and it's something that we practice. And so I truly believe it's something multi-generational.
Absolutely. Church is definitely our culture. I agree with you. Miss Joanne, can you tell me a little bit about the spirit and the culture that resides within Colombia? I'm sure it's a lot of similar sentiments.
It's very similar. I remember a couple of years ago, I was doing research. I decided to visit every single African American church in Maury County that was having a homecoming or Founders Day celebration. I had recently completed a book on the cemeteries. I transcribed the cemeteries and published it. And as I was traveling through Maury County, I saw all of these churches, some near cemeteries, some not. And I saw evidence of maybe a school being there, but no longer there. So I just decided to visit every single church to attend their homecoming or their Founders Day celebration. And I did this for about 2.5 years, collecting information on the history of these churches. And it is She's exactly right. That is a part of our culture. I remember going to one of these, and I sort of thought my grandfather was a member of that church or preached at that church, and I went down to this one church, and they had this beautiful brochure souvenir program, and I flipped the page, and there was a picture of my grandfather, and they were talking about my grandfather, and then the lady got up and sung a song that my grandfather wrote, like years and years and years ago, and it was like a wonderful experience. But the church is really a part of the African American culture. One thing that that happened here in Maury County last year, Columbia became the first city in the state of Tennessee to recognize Juneteenth as an official holiday. So that created, I think, a lot of community spirit from like not just Columbia, but like all over Maury County. So I thought that was really good. And there are nonprofit organizations too that are doing things to sort of build a community or deal with some of the issues in the community. I know there's one nonprofit who recently had this expungement program, you know, when police signed this law to reduce the fees for expungement. There was this huge effort to have the cases reviewed so that the possible expungements could be handled, which was really good. And one other thing that I thought was pretty good, the African American Heritage Society has lecture series. And a couple of years ago, we had a lecture series, and we invited a civil rights icon to come in and speak to the group. And we had it in a huge historic African American church. The church had been around since 1866, although they were in a different building. It had been around since 1866, and it was really huge. And I was just really happy to see a lot of people coming to that particular program, Black and white. And in fact, the city of Columbia hosted a luncheon for the board and for Dr. Bernard Lafayette. So that was really good. So to me, when I think of community spirit, I think of willingness to desire, everyone's willingness to desire to participate in all of the activities, Black and white. So I thought that was really good.
Thank you. Now, you said something about church homecomings. Now, for some people who may be watching this, when you think homecoming, I know I went to TSU, and homecoming is a very particular type of event. When you talk about a church homecoming, can you describe a little bit for us?
Well, it's an all-day service.
Okay.
They typically have, at my church, okay, we had an 8 o'clock service and an 8 o'clock service, Sunday school, and then like a dinner at 11 o'clock service, then dinner, and then like an evening service. And it's an opportunity for people to come and remember the church. And it's all about, in addition to the services, it's about food, because they have this huge dinner that's prepared, sometimes catered. But it's about honoring the people, the founders of the church. The one particular church that I attend is not in Columbia, and it's in Franklin, just because I've been with that family and the churches that they've been for like a long time. And the founder of that church was the founder of the little country church that I went to. So when I moved back here to go to that same church, and it's just a matter of honoring. And then everybody who's ever been a member of that church, who's still able to walk, regardless of where they live, will come to the homecoming. And that particular church had, in that particular family, had several ministers, and it was more than just a day. You know, in some cases it was more than a day. But it's a wonderful way to recognize the founders of the church. And it's history. They always talk about the history. They always talk about the women, the mothers, the organizations, and it's a wonderful experience.
I love that. So it's for those of you who caught everything that she said, a church homecoming is pretty much the same thing as your university homecoming, but the church homecoming is saved, sanctified, and running for the Lord. So I can't even be mad at that. Now,
and this was a Baptist church.
All right now. Well, now, Reverend Kessler, could you tell us a little bit about the culture and the spirit that you see in Knoxville?
Well, I'll say amen to what both Ms. McClellan and also Jeneisha has said, to everything they said. I love it. I could sit here and listen to them talk all day. So I'm a Baptist preacher, but I don't like to say that very frequently because I just preach. And the thing that's great is in Knoxville in the spirit, because I'm a preacher, I'm at the back, I preach all over. So I preach for the Episcopalian, the Presbyterian, the Methodist. I preach for the Baptist. I'll be preaching at Tennessee Universalist Unitarian Church. So I preach all over, black and white. And so I think the spirit is, now they know what they're going to get. I tell my white friends at the Episcopalians where they sit in the church and they move the frozen chosen and the Presbyterians, I said, now listen, just preacher to come and give a word. I said, and I'm not gonna leave till I get an amen. So we're gonna have to pump it up. So I think the spirit for me, and I want to say that again. I put that out there because it's, for me, it's all, I don't care if I'm invited, I go. And fortunately, I'm all over the circuit with every denomination and black and white in Knoxville. So I think that's a sweet spirit that happens here, which I'm grateful to God that we're able to have that. But I also don't ever want to offend any of my brothers and sisters who may or may not be of the Christian faith. I believe by faith that all faiths are important, and I don't ever want to disenfranchise even my Jewish brothers and sisters, and everyone who has my Muslim brothers and sisters who have their faith. So I'll tell you how much. We'll talk about Beck in a minute when we get to that story. But here at Beck, because we have a facility that allows us to do exhibits and, events. We have an event space and a gallery space. So we rent that out. Pre-COVID, we rent that out to lots of different groups. Every first Sunday, here at the Beck, which is where I'm the president. Before, my church is about 4 doors from here, Mount Calvary Baptist Church, my home church, though I preach all over. But it's 4 doors down. So I come on the first Sunday. I let my Buddhist friends in here at the Beck. This is their worship center. So they come and they do their Buddhist worship, and I walk down the street to my church, preach the gospel, come back, holler at my friends who are the Buddhists, lock it up, and we go home. So I think that there is a world big enough for all faiths, and I believe there's a world big enough for the spirit of all people. And I'd like to think that Knoxville is opening the doors to being appreciative of all people.
I love your answer so much. I wholeheartedly agree. I think there's definitely a misconception that everybody has to believe the same thing. We can all sit at this table together and love each other despite whatever it is that you choose to believe in. Now, when we using the spirit, because that's a really, really interesting topic, and there's a lot of depth when you start talking about spirit. Spirit creates a feeling in many cases, and it creates a feeling within the people, and those people can create a movement. So when you start to think about the spirit in relation to people and movements, are there any prominent figures or groups or movements that began in your community? And Jeneisha, you're up first.
I love this question so much because I get to amplify a few of the unsung people, specifically Orange Mound, not Memphis, but Orange Mound specifically. A few of those people are 8 Ball and MJG. If you have not heard of them, they are a very popular musical hip hop group. 3 6 Mafia, both groups have went on to do movies. They've sold millions of records, really, really just put on for Orange Mound in general. And last but not least, Dr. Alvin Crawford, who was the first Black MD to receive a medical degree from the University of Tennessee. And so those are just a few of the prominent figures that came out of Orange Mound. And in 2016, Michelle Obama actually recognized Orange Mound on a national level as a preserved American neighborhood. And so it's really, really good. It's such a good feeling to be recognized, because before there was Tulsa, before there was Harlem, there was Orange Mound. And so it's really, really nice to have that national recognition from Michelle Obama. But those are just a few of many, many prominent figures that came from Orange Mound.
Absolutely. As a Memphian, y'all know how I feel about A-Ball MJG and 3-6 Mafia. So I am right there with you on that. So absolutely, those are some definite important figures. Now, Miss Joanne, what are some of the prominent figures and movements and people that have come out of or been raised by Columbia and Maury County?
Well, there are just so many. I call them hidden figures because they're contributed to the success or the establishment of some of these communities. But I have a list of 30 or 40, but I was trying to think about just one or two. The first person that I would like to tell you guys about, his name is Edwin Kelly. He was a slave. We recently got a historical marker for him that's going to be going up in October. But he left here and went to New Bedford, Massachusetts. While he was in New Bedford, well, here he founded a church. When he was in New Bedford, Massachusetts, he started several churches, started schools. But what's significant about him is that during the 1863-62 time period, he met with Abraham Lincoln. And he was talking to Abraham Lincoln about African Americans going to war, fighting for their civil rights. He also met with Andrew Johnson and talked about during the Reconstruction period. Edmund Kelly wrote a series of, I call them position papers, talking about the kinds of things that we should think about when we're voting. He also wrote Sunday school manuals to talk about the African Americans as Christians. He I can't he is one of my favorite hidden figures, and a lot of his papers, a lot of the information about him is filed with the Lincoln Papers at the Library of Congress. The other person that I would want to mention is his son, J.H. Kelly. They were in Bedford at the time. J.H. was thinking about going to law school, but he decided to come down here and visit his relatives. He is the person that established the first African American school in Maury County that wasn't a freedman school. This was a public school for African Americans in Maury County. And then another person was J.W. Johnson. J.W. Johnson was from Maury County. He was the first African American president of Roger Williams University. But what J.W. Kelly and Johnson did, because after the Civil War, one of the issues was trained teachers, having enough teachers to teach all of the African Americans that wanted an education. So they started something called the Maury County Colored Teachers Institute. Every year for about 15 to 20 years, in the summer, they would train teachers in the art of teaching, in math and in science. And this went on until maybe like 1915 or so. Also, there was another institute that was started. It was called the Turner Normal Industrial Institute down here in Maury County. What I think is really, really interesting about Maury County was the focus on education. It seems as if we had a lot of people who really, really were interested in education. Education seemed to be the path, their true path to freedom. The other thing, I'll just mention one other person in the 1920s, because of the Black hospital movement and because African Americans needed a place to practice medicine and to see their patients, there was a Maury County Colored Hospital that was started here in Maury County that operated for over 30 years. And J. Kelly was involved in that. So a man who graduated from Roger Williams University, who also operated, he was a teacher and also ran a pharmacy. His name was Andrew Jackson Armstrong. And this was down here in Maury County. And the list just goes on and on and on. Modern day, we have artists who's had paintings on TV shows, the Cosby Show, for example. We have a lady from Murray County who's had recently plays at the Kennedy Center on Broadway. So we have a lot of people here from Murray County that we really should be proud of.
Thank you so much for that. I absolutely loved your depiction of Black excellence immediately following emancipation, because for some reason, most people, it escapes their minds historically. They think after emancipation that Black people was just kind of out here scrambling, trying to figure it out. And that is true for some people, but there is a large population of individuals who pave out their own road to freedom immediately following emancipation.
Exactly.
And I love that you highlighted that.
That's exactly right. They looked at their situation and decided to make a way for themselves.
Right.
And they went about the business of doing what they needed to do to get educated, to establish businesses. You know, I didn't mention that there was a man here on the square, downtown Columbia, that owned a barbershop at 18. So we've always had people who were movers and shakers.
I love it. I love that so much. Now, Reverend Kessler, same question. How did the spirit of your community, how did that form people, and what are the movements and the people that came out of your community that really stand out to you right now?
Well, okay, so we're doing 28 days of Black history and culture. So our e-newsletter is going out every day. So we're expounding on this. And I'm like Ms. McClellan, I could probably go on for days, but I thought, just to make it really quick and more relevant to today, because I could talk about a lot of the greats in Knoxville that we may or may not know, but to make it relevant to those who we know today, and one's one of my favorite, I always highlight women. I'll be honest with you, because when I came to Beck, everywhere I looked at my predecessors were both leaders in the civil rights movement. Mr. Booker, who was here before me, he will lead the civil rights movement in Knoxville. Mr. Rollins, who was also my predecessor, will be a co-founder of SNCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. So he'll go all over the country with Dr. King. These are the people's shoulders I stand on. So no pressure for me here at Beck to be in excellence. They are great. So I could talk about all of those, but when I came here, the first thing I asked myself, did women do anything in history? Because I'm looking all over and all I see is these men. So I'll be real honest with you. I'm very intentional about bringing Black women to the forefront and some of their achievements. So I'll give you one relevant current male today, just because I wanted to make this relevant. I hope we'll have time to talk about urban renewal and some of the histories of Knoxville and some of the folks in the past. But suffice it to say, today we were very proud of our young winner. 2017, the Voice winner was Chris Blue. And so Chris Blue is Knoxville. So we claim him here. He's here in Knoxville. We're very proud of him. He's doing fantastic music. So we're excited about what he's doing. Now I'm going to jump to 3 women real quick, and I'm going to hit the age categories. So I'm going to start with the youngest of those 3. And the first one right now, her name is Bianca Blair Bel-Air. So Bianca Blair is from Knoxville. She is a professional wrestler with the WWE, and she is bad. So she has a doll after her. She has, she's on the WWE, and she is fierce. And I have to tell her, because she was one of my girls. I coached her all the way from the time she was what we call a little shortcake. So she's one of my own, and she is now a professional wrestler. And we are super proud of her, and we keep her history. So she's breaking in world areas that we never think about. Second woman I want to mention, her name is Dr. Cynthia Fleming. She's still with us as well. She's a professor emeritus at the University of Tennessee. Here's what I want to say about her. She's going to be the first African-American woman to get a doctorate degree from Duke University, from right here in Knoxville, Tennessee. Finally, my all-time favorite girl, and not only because she's one of my sorors, she's a member of the illustrious Delta Sigma Theta sorority, but she is fierce. Nikki Giovanni. And so it's my girl. I'll boom, drop the mic on that one.
You took the words out of my mouth. That was a mic drop. Like, you can't even continue it. Nikki Giovanni is at like the top of the list when it comes to Black writers in my book. I studied history, so of course I like to read, and her books are phenomenal, and they've definitely opened my mind to so many different thought processes concerning being Black and being a woman and being in the South. So I love it. I absolutely love it.
Dear
Now,
friend, and I talk to her often, and I am telling you right now, she is a bad woman. So I don't take it lightly that I get the privilege of texting her whenever I want to, but I'm just telling you, she's fierce.
next time you talk to her, tell her she has a whole generation of young millennial women that grew up on her reading, her writing, and we still appreciate her, and we want to give her flowers now.
And she's still writing, so she's still killing it.
Oh man, see that? We gonna talk camera out there. Now, keep it a little bit, because you can't always. I mean, the highs are wonderful, but we have to talk about the lows as well, because we want to make sure that we have a really balanced conversation concerning our communities. So, what are some of the main challenges that have historically faced your communities, and what are some of the challenges that you have now? And are there some parallels there? We all know the answer to this question already, but let's tell that to the audience. We'll start with you, Jeneisha.
Yes, so recent studies show us that Orange Mound is a very small community of about 13,000 people who average around $35,000 annually. Just in 2020, there were 300 homicides in all of Memphis, but many of those occurred in Orange Mound. So I personally believe that crime is the direct result of the lack of opportunity. I'll say that again. Crime is the direct result of the lack of opportunity. So I find that many of the issues that we have are intertwined. And so in the past 5 years, we've had many high schools and middle schools that had to close due to lack of resources and lack of funding. And so if schools are being closed, that means jobs are being decreased. If we have a lack of jobs, that means that crime is being increased. That means that mass incarceration is being increased, and then that means that poverty ultimately is being increased. So I find that many of the issues that we have historically are intertwined, and many of the issues that we had back in the past, we still have them. Just in 2019, one of the only grocery stores. Imagine one day, you see on the TV that the only grocery store in your community is closing down without notice. And so that was the situation in Orange Mound in 2019. And so people who used to walk to the grocery store, older people who used to walk to the grocery store, could no longer do that because the closest grocery store was about 10 miles away. And so how do you tell that to a people who have been walking to this Kroger for 55 years? How do you tell them that? And so thankfully last year, the councilwoman, Ms. Jeneisha, in collaboration with the mayor there in Memphis, they opened up a super low and replaced that Kroger. So now the residents of Orange Mound are able to get, their groceries and everything that they need at a walking distance if that's, what they choose to do. And so, like I said before, many of the issues that we have are intertwined. They're not, you can't separate them. You can't have one without the other. They're all intertwined.
I agree with you. I love the fact that you brought up food deserts in the Black community. Yes. That's a big deal. It's a hot topic right now. And I think it's something that definitely needs to be paid a little bit more attention to, especially looking at the rate of heart disease and cancers and diabetes in our communities. We have to begin to address how food deserts play a role in these diseases, how we eat, what we eat.
And if you look at those numbers and you study where those people live in and the communities that they live in, you will see, and you will drive around, you will see a Burger King, you will see McDonald's. If you go to Germantown or Bartlett or Carterville, which are all located in Memphis, you see Whole Foods, you see Trader Joe's, you see juice shops. And so there's this impression that, people in Orange Mound can't afford that or don't even want that food. But it's very sad to see that the numbers of diabetes and heart failure. I actually lost my grandmother last year to some of those illnesses because the places around her were not healthy. And so that's definitely an issue that I'm advocating for now with my free breakfast program that I have coming up this summer.
Absolutely. And I'm a big supporter of her free breakfast program. So if you need more information, feel free to email me and we can help out the babies, y'all. Now, Miss Joanne, when you think about some of the challenges that have faced your community, can you expound on those a little bit, challenges historically, and then what are some of the challenges today?
Well, I think it's the same. I think historically and education. I think a good education is like the key Without an education, you can't get marketable skills or build marketable skills. I think it's education, and I think young people will need the education to be equipped to deal with a lot of their life challenges. They have to learn. And I heard recently that some of the test scores, the kids are below reading levels, and they're below the math levels, grade levels in math. So to me, with everything, education is the key. And if you don't have that good education, it's going to be a problem. Life's going to be a challenge. And I can remember back after the Civil War, one of the things that these formerly enslaved people, they wanted education and they wanted to be able to control their own destiny. But in order to do that, they had to learn to read and write. So education to me is the key. It was the key then and it's the key now.
I absolutely agree. Education saved my life. I'm very, very thankful for a set of parents who believed that I needed to be educated and who did not let me slack on education. My parents were still checking my grades until I was a junior in college. So I was like partially grown. So I agree.
I can relate to that. I have a son who graduated from college and our grandchildren who are planning to go. So I'm still checking their grades too. So
I think that's amazing. Yeah, education has always been one of the keys and tools that we need to success. And when you use education correctly, it can definitely take you places beyond your wildest dreams. Now,
exactly.
Reverend Kessler, what are some of the challenges you see Knoxville facing today? And what are some of the historic challenges as well? And are they intertwined?
Yes, absolutely. Let me first extend my condolences to Jeneisha. Hang on one second. I'm sorry. Did I freeze up? Yeah. Did I freeze up? No. All right. Let me extend my condolences to Jeneisha on the transitioning of her grandmother. I heard you say that. When that matriarch of the family, that's a whole nother level. So blessings to you and your family. One of the things that did. So let me pause for just a second and see if I can switch my background. I wanted to. So I wanted to switch to background so I can really give you a perspective of Knoxville. So this picture is actually what Knoxville looked like. This was what we call the Black community. So back in the day, this is the Black community, what we call pre-urban renewal. So you have all your churches, your schools, your businesses, your institutions. All of that is within this space. Now I'm going to just flip the screen one more time, and I'm going to show you what that looks like today. So if you come to Knoxville today, that's the exact same picture today. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to talk to you about that picture. So let me just get it back to what it used to look like, because it's really important to understand what it was in order to understand what it is. So behind me in Knoxville, prior to urban renewal in Knoxville, okay, first of all, this is very important. In Knoxville, urban renewal is going to go from 1959 to 1974. However, HUD's going to sign the act in 1949. Housing and Urban Development is going to sign the Housing and Urban Development Act that says that we're going to go into these inner city communities, urban communities, we're going to revitalize them, right? So what the act, that was in 1949, but what year did I say this happened for Knoxville? What did it start? Sure the audience heard me say what year.
What street is that?
Church Street, which goes to downtown Knoxville.
Okay. Yeah, okay.
So let me just read, this is very important. Urban renewal, I always said, started in Knoxville in 1959 and went to 1974. I said that to a person who lived urban renewal, and he said, "You're wrong, Renee." And I said, "Excuse me, I know my history." The date is 1959. He said, "No, you're wrong." The Housing and Urban Development Act for revitalization. They were doing urban renewal projects all over the country. And as I mentioned, Knoxville wasn't unique. Just like when I talked about race and all this stuff, everything that's happening all over the country, each community has its own taste of that. So urban renewal was not unique to Knoxville. It was happening all over the country, but the act was signed in 1949. And that's important. So here's the deal. Reneé, what he taught me was in 1959, the first building came down. But long before the first building came down, they tore down the spirit of the people. So in 1949, as soon as you hear this urban renewal is getting ready to happen, they're getting ready to come into urban neighborhoods, they're getting ready to change things, you put the fear in the people. Check this out. In 1949, there's a school, this is an example, called High School Elementary School. High School Elementary School goes to the 6th grade in 1949. The act is passed. By 1950, when those 6th graders graduate, high school elementary school goes to 5th grade. 1951, when the 5th graders graduate, 4th grade. The next year, when the 4th graders graduate, 3rd grade. People are starting to get antsy. What's going on? What's happening? What's happening to my community? Something's coming. Something's coming. By the time it's all said and done, before 1959, high school elementary will have 1 grade left, and then the school will go. So urban renewal is just like slavery or anything else. It was never about the physical building coming down. That's easy. And that's what happened in 1959. Slavery was never about the physical abuse that Black people had to endure. It was the spiritual, it was the mindset. Because if I can break your spirit, if I can break your mind, I got you. The physical is easy. Same thing here. Urban renewal is not just about physical buildings coming down. It's about breaking the spirit of a people. And that's what we have to learn to overcome. We got to figure this thing out. In this neighborhood, there were 107 African-American owned businesses, 15 churches, almost 3,000 homes, and 107 African-American owned businesses, 15 churches, almost 3,000 homes, all taken down. And do you know how many businesses? 107 in Knoxville, African-American owned. All of that gets wiped away, and they're supposed to relocate and go somewhere else. Of all of those 107 African-American businesses, only one has survived today. Only one. The oldest Black business in Knoxville is the only one that survived. Now, I'm a preacher, so I can make this funny. It's the mortuary.
Which one is it?
Not dead. That's bad. So many levels. But what's interesting about it is Jordan and Son Mortuary. But what's interesting about it is that it wasn't the only. There were several undertakers, large ones. The Wheeler, we talked about it. It was the largest African American undertaker in this community. In fact, it's statewide. It had a fleet of cars. Taxi businesses all over, all gone in the name of urban renewal. And as you saw, what came in, which is not unique because it happened to all other communities, was the interstate, I want you to see, if you can see, there's a picture of the building in the middle. Let's see if I can get my hand right here. Do you see the building here? That's the Civic Coliseum. And the Civic Coliseum came online. It was one of the first, it went in 3 phases. So it's one of the first buildings that came online. And when the Civic Coliseum came online, I want you to understand this. A few years ago in Knoxville, they were talking about, oh, we need to get rid of the Civic Coliseum because, it's old, it's dilapidated. We've got the new convention center now. So Knoxville doesn't need that old Coliseum. When they asked me, they said, Renee, what do you think about the Civic Coliseum? Should we tear it down or should we keep it? And I said to them, whether you tear it down or whether you keep it, I need you to understand the history. What got tore down to build the Civic Coliseum. Just to build the Civic Coliseum took 72 residences, 9 businesses, and 2 churches just to build it. And now here you are saying, let's take it down again. So what I say is history just keeps repeating itself. So whether you take it down or whether you don't, you have to know what got torn down to build it, or we just keep cycling it back over again. I'll stop right there because I could keep going on urban renewal.
You just said an entire mouthful. For those of you who are not familiar with James Baldwin, he has a very wonderful quote where he refers to urban renewal as Negro removal, which is essentially exactly what it was. So I echo you when you say that you break the spirit and you'll eventually, sadly, you'll break the community and you'll break the people as a result. And there's a link here. As she said, urban renewal is not specific to Knoxville. If you watch the Jefferson Street Facing North documentary, you saw that urban renewal hit our very own historic Jefferson Street in a way that it never was able to fully recover from. So we know that this urban renewal issue was a continuing issue over time. So I'm going to pivot a little bit now, and we're going to get a little bit more specific to each of your communities in general. And again, Jeneisha, I'm going to start with you, but can you describe what it was like growing up for you in Orange Mound?
Wow, I could talk about that all day. Growing up in Orange Mound was a great but hard life. I talked about a little earlier about my free breakfast program. I like to say that I am a continuing organizer and not the founder of this program because I continued the work that the Black Panther Party started in 1969 with their free breakfast program. And I simply am doing the work in Nashville this time. But for the past 3 years, I feed 100+ kids every single day for about 12 weeks during the summertime. So we know that some kids, the only meals that they get are from breakfast and lunch at school that were provided by the school system. And so actually the free breakfast program that we now benefit from federally is a result of the work that the Black Panther Party did. And so they put pressure on the government. And a lot of people don't know that we are reaping the benefits of what they worked so hard to do. And so I initially started the program, one, to continue that work, and two, I have a story that I like to tell of my 11th grade year. Times were very tough. At home, it was a family of 6 of us in one house. And we didn't have food in the refrigerator. Literally, if you opened up the refrigerator, you would see absolutely nothing. And so a couple of friends gave me their lunch. I pretended that I was super hungry that specific day. So I had their 2 lunches and my lunch. And I took that lunch home and I split it up between all 6 of us. And so that's a story of why I started this free breakfast program, because there are families, there are children that are starving. And so I always promised myself in that moment, as I cried eating such a gross bologna sandwich or whatever it was that specific day, I always promised myself that if I had the opportunity, I would give back. Because children like me needed that. And so I started my free breakfast program this year. I'll be in 3 cities, in Harlem, in Memphis, and in Nashville. So I'm so super excited. Now more than ever, children need food. They need healthy food, nutritious food, especially in the midst of a pandemic. And so that's something that I'm super proud to do, to continue the work of the Black Panther Party, and to intertwine that with my story a little bit about food malnutrition within children who are impoverished. I see a question, and I guess I'll save that for later. So yeah, growing up in Orange Mound, that's just a small story. I have so many, but growing up in Orange Mound, we had so much fun. Kids nowadays, they don't go outside. We went outside, we played. Everybody in Orange Mound knows everybody. Not a lot of people make it out of where I'm from. In the past 2 years, I've been to over 20 funerals of just classmates, of friends, of family. And so Orange Mound is a very peculiar community, but it is rich in love, although we, starve in resources and accessibility at times. And so for me, Orange Mound is a part of who I am. I see someone asking about the free breakfast program. If you follow me on Instagram at Jeneisha Harris, that's JeneIsha. I also have a website, JeneishaHarris.com. You can go, you can click, you can donate, you can see how to get involved. You will see pictures of the kids, of all of my babies that I'm so happy to serve again this upcoming summer. But to answer your question, growing up in Orange Mound was very eventful, very stressful, very hard, but I would not be who I am today without those struggles. And if anybody ever asks me, do I have any regrets growing up in Orange Mound? The answer will always be no.
Everyone that I know from Orange Mound feels the same way. If you guys have ever been to, or if you're from Memphis, if you've heard of Orange Mound, you know that Orange Mound is not in Memphis. It is Orange Mound, Tennessee. It is its own city.
Separate.
They are separate.
It
they
is
are very,
Orange Mound, Tennessee.
I think Mayo actually reads that. No, I love that, and thank you so much for your transparency. I definitely can resonate with that. Growing up in poverty is definitely something that touches a lot of people in many different ways. And when you do come from poverty, it is very easy to get caught up in feeling like you have to do things on the fast track in efforts of hoping to get out of poverty. And not a lot of people make it out. So congratulations to you for doing the work necessary to make it out. Now, Miss Joanne, I have another specific question for you, because I'm very intrigued by rural communities, because I'm a city child who is engaged to a country boy. Can you explain what is the relationship between the rural communities that surround Colombia? Because I'm sure there's a culture that is very similar, but I'm sure they also have their own uniqueness as well.
Interesting. Well, I grew up in one of those rural communities that surround Colombia. It was like, and I live in one of those rural communities that surround Colombia. The city where I'm currently living is an area, a little town called Santa Fe. My father's family was here forever. In fact, we bought land that had been in his family for over 100 years. Mm-hmm. And we're living in the middle of 30 acres on top of this hill. But I grew up in a little area not too far from here, and I was across the street from my one grandfather, next door to my other grandfather. We were it was a small farming community, if you will. There were probably 100 African-American families there. I don't know how many white families there, but there were about 100 African-American families, 100 African-American people there, because I remember taking the census when I was in like the 8th grade. I went to a Rosenwald school, if you remember what a Rosenwald school is. I went to a Rosenwald school from grades 1 to grade 8. But although we were poor, I am the second of 9 children. We were very poor, but my dad worked at Roston Carina Company, but the family worked. We did farm work. We worked into primarily tobacco. So we understood that in order for the family to survive, everyone had to work. We grew our own vegetables. We grew our own meat. We had cows and pigs. So it was a wonderful life. I can remember, and I was thinking about this, my school teacher a couple of days ago, someone at the Murray County Archives, and I remember, she had about 30 or 40 kids in this little school, and I remember her standing at the door every single morning greeting all of us, saying, and remember, she taught all 8 grades, saying, "Good morning, hold your head high, walk tall, because you are somebody." So she would tell all of her children, that's the message every single morning, and she greeted us. So we knew that she thought we were special. So when we were having to do homework and we were having to do this and that in the school, I mean, it was a pleasure, because we knew that we were special. And she encouraged all of us, because when I was in elementary school, 2 or 3, only about 5 years before that did they run a bus to the elementary, to that community, to send the kids to high school. My uncle, he had, my grandfather bought him a car in order for him to go to high school. So by the time I got ready to go to high school, there was a bus out there. So it was a small, self-contained community. We had 3 churches, we had the school, but it was a self-contained community that people like cared about each other. And the community, although there are not many people there now, only in that particular community, there are only about 3 African Americans, but the community still cares. My mother lives in that community. The community still cares for the people in the community. So, and we went into Colombia. We went into Colombia for almost everything. We had a country store, but we went into Colombia to the doctor. We went into Colombia to the real grocery store. So there was never a time when we didn't have a need to go into Colombia. You're going to get a driver's license, you go into Colombia. If you want to do anything big like that, you would go into Colombia. So we were really we were sort of isolated, but not isolated. But it was a small, loving community, if you will. And the fact that I lived right next door to one grandfather and grandmother and across the street from the other, that really helped, right?
I bet. Now, we have a question for you, Miss Joanne. Someone wants to know, is there a book about the Black history of Maury County that you don't mind sharing?
A book about the Black history of Maury County? No. That's one of my projects. Unfortunately, the people who wrote about Maury County excluded most of the African American history. You may find, for example, you will find books written about events like the Colombia race riot, but you won't find books about the true history of Maury County. And I have been working for like 2 or 3 years trying to compile the history, like the history of the churches or whatever, but no. And the books, Maury County history books, there's only a small mention. The one, when I first recognized this as a problem, I looked at the history of my community, and there was this book that was written, and it was like a driving tour kind of book, and the writer was saying, well, now we're going to come up this hill, and if you turn right, you'll go out to the Phi Tower, and they have a lot of chestnut trees. By turning right, you would have gone into that African American community where I lived. And nothing was really talked about. Now, there is a book that was written in 1907 where it's called Century Review. There are some statements or some comments about some African Americans in certain aspects of certain areas of Maury County, like there's a little community called Gravel Hill. They talked about, actually talked about my Rosenwald teachers' family, who started a school and church up in that Gravel Hill community. But in answer to the question, absolutely, there's nothing now, but hopefully I will soon have a book that talks about the African American history of Maury County. The history is so rich.
Okay.
Which means it's going to take a long time to get it all down.
Gotcha. We totally understand. Now, I do have a question. For those of you who don't know what a Rosenwald school is, it was a project that happened in the South in the 20th century where a man named Julius Rosenwald, who was Jewish American, he decided that he wanted to pretty much build schools whose sole focus was educating African American children in the South. So it was a very specific project that happened at one point in time. Now, I also just got a text, Dr. Williams. Dr. Lee Williams is in the audience. Hey, Dr. Williams. He told me that it was somebody's birthday yesterday. So we want to tell Miss Joanne a happy belated birthday.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. We don't talk about birthdays at a certain age.
Now, Dr. Kessler, Reverend Kessler, would you explain a little bit about what it was like for you growing up Black and in Knoxville? What was your community like growing up?
Sure. Let me just again affirm Jeneisha because she just blesses my heart to know that she is killing it, right? Unto whomsoever much is given, of them much is required. And so she is really, it blesses my heart when I see our young people out there doing the real work that needs to be done, giving back. So you can go either way with that. But Jeneisha, what you're doing, I just want to affirm you and encourage you and tell you to keep going and know that we support you. We have your back. I think each generation has to go higher and higher. So I just really want to bless her and thank God for her and for the work that she's doing, the commitment to excellence that she truly has. So I think that's beautiful. Renee Kessler was raised by a single mom. She had two children, Renee Kessler and Joe. Renee, I'm not going to say the maiden name, but anyway, Renee and Joey, little Renee and little Joey. We were raised in the hood, in the projects, and my mother worked every day, raised two children in East Knoxville and, public housing. And, I didn't know we were poor. I didn't find out, unlike Jeneisha, we always had food, but I didn't know we were poor. So when someone interviewed us, so you were poor. If I was poor, I don't remember being poor. My mom loved so hard and so much, and there was so much community. Everybody kept us. Everybody looked out for everybody. In a real neighborhood. So I don't remember being poor. In fact, when my mom finally married our stepdad, we got a house. I never lived in a house before. And then we were supposed to be rich, rolling in the dough is what I'm guessing. But I think the Christmases got worse. I think it was better when she was a single mom. But that's another story. I'll go on to become a banker for 15 years. I'm a banker, a vice president for Northeast Tennessee. So I'm a banker. Community economic development is my background in business. I am the president of that Cultural Exchange Center. My mom will raise two children, and my brother will become a NFL football player. He'll win the Super Bowl with the Dallas Cowboys. So I don't believe that I've been blessed. I've been blessed because I've had a village. I don't take that lightly. There are great people in this community who believed in us. My mother believed in us. And so I think you just don't want to let them down, right? Yeah. You want to raise a standard. So I was born and raised in the Black community, again, born and raised in a lower income community in Knoxville and East Knoxville. Now I live in the house that I grew up in. We moved back after our children, my husband and after our children were grown. Our youngest daughter graduated from the University of Memphis. She's a social justice. She's now a Black feminist, working in the Black feminist movement in Atlanta. And then I have an attorney. My daughter's an attorney in Atlanta. So, and then I have nephews, because if you know the Black family, you don't just have the kids that you birth, right? So I have three bonus boys. I have two nephews that came out of our house and one bonus son. So I actually have 5 children that came out of my house, 2 that came out of my stomach. But suffice it to say, all 5 came out of my heart. And I think that's the way it is in most Black families. If somebody needs somewhere to stay or you need to rent, you just do it. And we call that a privilege. So I'm just honored to be here tonight. Knoxville has done well for me, and I have tried my best to give back. I'm on assignment here. I never wanted to leave Knoxville, and then all of a sudden I was like, okay, I'm ready to go now. And then God wouldn't let me leave. It's like I wanted to stay here, and then all of a sudden, when I'm ready to go, He said, no. I think there's work for me to do here in Knoxville, and I have hope. I love people as a child of God, as a person. And I always try to find, I like the way Alex Haley said, find the good and celebrate it. I try to find the good in people. I like the way James Baldwin says, he said, if you're not afraid to look back, then nothing you're facing can frighten you. And there's an old African proverb that says, and this is what I love that Jeneisha is doing. It says, when you take the elevator to the top floor, don't forget to send it back down, so someone else can ride it up. And then finally, there's one other African proverb that says, my ears cannot hear what you say, because my eyes see what you do. So I
All
hope
right.
I'm living a life that's pleasing so that when people see me, they see something better, they see hope. And I always want to exude love for all people, irrespective of whether we agree or not. I'm trying to live a life that's pleasing and that's loving and kind to all people. Unfortunately, we're living in a moment where we're seeing some of the ugly sides of our world and of people, but I still believe in the goodness of people.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, Reverend Kessler, you have a question
Yes.
and man to everything that you just said. I think I'm big on African proverbs because I think they speak from the heart and they speak from the spirit. And I love that so much. But someone wants to know, they say they live in Knoxville.
Mhm.
And they know very little about the city's African American history. They want to know, are there any resources with the BEC or any other organizations where they can read and begin to learn more about the city's African American history?
Absolutely. So BEC was created as a result, 1975, as a result of urban renewal. In fact, when the Black community got wiped out and cleared out, the Black people began to bring all of their history, all of their archives here to the BEC Cultural Exchange Center. And that's how we got created. BEC's named after James and Ethel Beck, the final Black people to live in the house that's behind me. Again, you have the original house built in 1912. And then we have an exhibit hall that was built in 2010. We have a gallery built in 2010 extension, and then we have a library built in 2007. So we keep expanding. In addition, right next door, we own the property next door as well. And I'm in the middle of actually beginning to do construction on it. The capital campaign is wrapped up. It's called the will be opening. The Delaney's are world-renowned artists, Buford and Joseph Delaney. Buford Delaney is going to be world-renowned. He's one of the greatest artists of the 20th century from right here. He was poor in Knoxville. We own the last home place that will become a permanent museum. So BEC is a repository for Black history and culture in the state of Tennessee. We have been designated as such. So we have a complete archive studio with thousands of archives and pictures and history. We have a research studio that people do research. Unfortunately, we're closed to the public still because of COVID, but we're virtually open. Our virtual doors are wide open. I do a monthly racial justice panel discussion that I've been doing since George Floyd was murdered in June. We started our first one at Juneteenth, and we do it every month. We have a litany of things at beckcenter.net. You can log on. You can also sign up for the e-newsletter. We're doing 28 days of Black history. You'll get an e-newsletter and Black history facts in your mailbox every day this month, and then always ongoing. It tells you what's happening at the BEC. One of the resources I want to share with you is BEC has done several books. So we have 5 books plus 2 publications. One of our favorite premier books is called 200 Years of, let me see if I can get it right. Let me get to give me just 1 second, and I'm trying to figure out where I can put it to get it where you can see it. I'm not doing a very good job, but it's got 200 years of Black history and Black culture. Maybe if I put it all the way up. Nope, that doesn't work at all. Anyway, I'm very sorry that you can't see this. Maybe if I get out of the picture, will it work? Nope. The camera won't let me show you this book, but this book is 200 Years of Black Culture and History. It's a hardback book. It's 1791 to 1991, and we know history did not stop in 1991, that it continues, but this book stops in 91, but it takes you from the beginning, the number of people that were here in the city, all of the greats, the Blacks, the churches, as Miss McClellan was talking about. The oldest church is 1845, so all the churches, the schools, the businesses are in this book. This book is $25. This is the first book you have to have. It'll take you from the beginning of Knoxville Black history and culture and take you all the way to 1991 to give you a flavor for what Knoxville was like. We have another book that's sort of a sequel to this that fills in some of the missing holes that didn't get in this book when it got finished. So we have that. Another book that's not actually available for print, but when you come to BEC, you can get it. It's In There Was Light. This is the 1875 to 1995, the 120-year book of Knoxville College. So all of our greats that were in Knoxville College, we have this book now. Unfortunately, this book is out of print and you cannot buy it. If you see it on Amazon, it's like $500. We have all the copies that are left here at the BEC, so it's a very expensive publication. But if you come to BEC, you can read it in the research lab and you can use it. So we are a research facility, so students come here to do a lot of their research. But again, as a first resource, let me encourage you to get the 200-year book, Black History and Culture. We have the race riots. We did the book on that. I just republished, this is exciting. There's a Black woman. Her name was Ruth Cobb Bryce. She wrote under the pseudonym, or she painted and wrote. She was an author. She's the first Black woman to author a book here in Knoxville, circa 1930s. But she's an artist. And if you go around Knoxville, you see these art wraps around the city. So we've got art wraps on Buford Delaney and also on Ruth Cobb Bryce. Some of her art is on the wraps. We have a lot of her original art pieces. Well, and she started a children's book. And so this was probably circa 1930s. And she did all the illustrations for this children's book. She wrote it. So we have the entire manuscript. It never got published. So we just published that for Christmas in December. So it's Ruth Cobb Bryce's children's book. So we talk about her history. So it's for preschool kids and elementary kids. So it's sort of like the See Jane Run, See Dick Run, that kind of thing. But it uses foods and healthy foods so that children, so it's all the characters in the books are healthy foods. And someone gets sick because they were eating bad foods like candy and cakes. And so in the end, you see all the friends come together. So there are a lot of messages in there. Also, George Washington Carver would have come here to Knoxville and visited Knoxville College. We tried to recruit him. She does a nod to him, which means she knew him as well. So we have a little bit of his history in the book, and she does a nod to him in the book. So we literally just published her book, her children's book, which we're excited. It's the first time we've done a children's book. So we have lots of different resources here at the back, and though we're closed to the public, you can call. And my staff is there part-time. My students who work at UT in various schools, they work at the front desk and purchase and then leave back out. So not necessarily tour the museum, but you can purchase the books, except for the Knoxville College book. I just like to throw that out there. It's like Dream Killer, but you can do a research on that.
Reverend Kessler, bit of trivia. Mrs. Bryce gave me a painting for a wedding gift.
Wow! Do you still have it?
Of course, it's hanging in my family room.
What is the painting of?
It's a drummer boy.
Awesome. I'll know her painting because I know her artwork, so I would be able to recognize it.
She did it in 1960. I got married in 67, so she had it before that. We visited her all the time. I think I have two. I think I have two of her paintings.
Wow, awesome. So we bring in the Black women back.
Yes. Wow.
Thank you.
All right. Well, last but not least, our Director of Education, Jeff Sellers, wants to know, Reverend Kessler, what time are you preaching on Sunday? He says
I am preaching on Sunday. I'm at Tabernacle Baptist Church on Sunday at 11 a.m. and it'll be live, so you'll be able to get it. We gonna have a word.
Well, I just want to tell each and every one of you, thank you so much for coming today and for your transparency, for your honesty, and for being so willing to discuss your community in the highlights and in some of the lowlights, because it is very hard to do both sometimes. So I'm very appreciative of your time with us today. If we don't
Bridget, really quickly, if I can, there's a book that I would love to amplify about the history of Orange Mound.
Yeah.
There was a case study that was done from 1890 to 1980 on Black life and Black culture in Orange Mound. And that book is by Charles Williams. You can find it on Amazon or any bookstore that sells books.
Absolutely. So make sure you get all of your literature in, y'all.
I will get one for the Beck, so we have it here at the Beck too. So, and Jeneisha, you'll have to come and talk about it, but I will get it here at the Beck.
Absolutely.
Well, thank y'all so much. If we don't have any more questions, I don't see any. I guess we can begin to call it a night. Y'all have been wonderful, and I pray that everyone has a blessed evening. And I hope to work with each and every one of y'all very, very soon in the near future. So have a wonderful night. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
And it was so great to share space with all of you.